Level up your LA Kings experience with the new Vivid Seats Elite Seats. All the on-ice Kings action with even more exclusive access. Enjoy great seats to the game along with premier dining inside the Lexus Club with all-you-can-eat food and non-alcoholic beverages. Plus, get a free Team LA Kings item and parking with your purchase. Score your Vivid Seats Elite Seats tickets today and earn rewards on each purchase from the only ticket company that rewards you for buying. Experience it live with Vivid Seats, the official partner of the LA Kings.
You're listening to an LA Kings podcast. For more episodes of this and every other Kings program, visit lakings.com/podcast.
You're listening to All the Kings Men, the official podcast of the LA Kings. Now, here's your host, Jesse Cohen.
All right, it is Monday morning, and it is time to crown a King of the Week. And joining me this week are the three gentlemen from the Hockey Royalty podcast and website. Joe Paterino, how are you doing today, Joe?
Very good, Jesse. How are you?
I'm excellent, thank you. Russell Morgan, how are you doing today, Russell?
I'm doing great, Jesse. Good to see you again.
And if I'm not mistaken, and I might be, making his All the Kings Men debut, Randon McMahon. How are you doing today, Rando?
You're not mistaken. I'm fantastic, man. How you doing?
I couldn't remember if I'd ever, did I not? Anyway. All right, I said debut, so that's the debut. So the three games that we're covering this week, and I felt, listen, we've had this conversation before. When I schedule people to come on, I frequently do it before the games have been played, and sometimes it works out, and sometimes I ask you guys on, and it's like a 4-game week, and they go over, and I'm like, no, sorry, I had you guys on, and the King of the Week, we're picking between like 3 guys that had 1 point and 10 guys that had, none, but were like a +1, and it's like, well. But this week, 3-0, they defeated the Winnipeg Jets 4-1 on the 1st of April. They defeated the Utah Hockey Club 4-2 on the 3rd, and they defeated the Edmonton Oilers just yesterday. We're recording this on Sunday by a score of 3-0 at home. Now, it was an Edmonton Oilers team without Connor McDavid and blah, 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 and Leon Draisaitl, blah, blah, blah. So before we get into the King of the Week, Russ, I'm going to start with you. On a scale of 1 to 10, how much do you care that victory over Edmonton came without the arguably 2 of the best hockey players in the world on the roster? Or in the lineup, I should say. They're still on the roster.
Like, as far as how much it excites me.
Yeah, because I saw people complaining about style points and it should have been this and they should have done that in the first period, this and blah, blah, blah. But it's still a 3-0 win.
Yeah, of course, taking away McDavid and Draisaitl and even Ekholm too, it definitely loses a little bit of luster. It certainly didn't feel as exciting in the building. You can kind of sense it a little bit. But even then, I think a lot of people I talked to, and I talked to other media people before the game, and everyone was kind of hoping you'd see like some kind of stomping almost. Like we just saw the Kings beat the Sharks 8-1, so you were kind of hoping for something similar to that. 3-0 is really nothing to turn your head at. It's still a typical kind of Kings win in every fashion that they kind of want to win throughout the season and the way they want to play. So I guess if I would give it a number, I'd say 6.5 out of 10.
All right, that's fair. Yeah. Now, Joe, to Russ's point, almost identical to the 8-1 win over the Sharks, my attitude is, yeah, okay, you beat a team that you should beat and yada, yada, yada. But imagine the reaction if they had lost.
Mm-hmm.
And so just avoiding that, it's good enough for me.
Yep, it's funny. I was in a chat, and I had said just when it appeared to be clear that both McDavid and Draisaitl were not going to be playing, I said, I'm just going to put this out there ahead of time. If the Kings win, it doesn't mean they're winning in the first round. If the Kings lose, it doesn't mean they're losing in the first round. Sure. It's a big 2 points in the standings, in the sense that I don't care who's in the lineup. You need those 2 points if you want to stay in the hunt in the division, which they are technically. I know Vegas is playing tonight, and you built 2 more point cushion on Edmonton for home ice. Did the performance itself, knowing who they were missing, give me any grand confidence going into the first round? No, but to your point, I don't know that a loss would have done much either way for me either. It is what it is. It was kind of a scheduled win. We talk about scheduled losses a lot. I feel like that was kind of a scheduled win given the players that they were missing.
Yeah, I don't know how far in advance we knew that those 2 guys weren't coming. So
sure.
I don't know. But I hear what you're saying. And Rando, that 4-point window over second place with 6 games left, I don't want to say it's impossible to lose it, but it becomes a lot harder to lose a 4-point lead over the team behind you than it does a 2-point lead.
Yeah, I mean, home ice advantage has been key in the minds of the players, it seems like, and the minds of the fans. And so I think that it goes a long way with that 4-point, little distance. And we're nipping at the heels of Vegas. I mean, they won the other day. And so
Thanks for nothing, Calgary.
I know. Getting maybe to play the Blues in the first round and then having to, get that monkey off the first round exit loss off your back and then have, play another team after that might be something different. I think a lot of people want them to play Edmonton and just kind of charge face first into the fear of the fans. But I think 2 points is 2 points, like Joe said, and it was key for them to get a win no matter what the cost.
It's funny. So yesterday after the Kings won, but before the Calgary Vegas game started, there was some discussion out there of, would you want the first round matchup against St. Louis? Would you want it against Edmonton? And my attitude was, and it still is today, I get St. Louis is on a hot streak, but I don't know. It's a hot streak. Like, it'll end, and then you're looking at a team that before the hot streak was 2 games above 500 before they went on a hot streak. And I just want to avoid Edmonton's power play at all costs. I'm just traumatized, I'm sorry, by 3 years of those 2 guys on the power play. I just don't want it anymore.
The only way you could realistically ask for want Edmonton is if McDavid and Draisaitl are not going to be participating. If they are, I'll take St. Louis. Thank you.
Yeah, let's be real here. Does anybody really think the Blues are a better team than Edmonton when Edmonton's fully healthy? Nobody realistically thinks that. So
if they do that wrong.
Yeah, exactly. I totally agree with you. In terms of they're just winning right now, so it's great. And they're obviously pushing for a playoff spot, and they have been. So there's that added emphasis as well. But yeah, I mean, if you can get away from having to defend McDavid and Draisaitl on a power play that we've seen be so potent for them, at least as soon as last season, then I'm all for it.
Yeah, it's crazy to me. And, I'm sorry to bring this up and poke holes in a Kings player, but when Quentin Byfield scored 6 games in a row and then scored 2 more, I think there was a game or 2 off where he didn't score. And then so he had something like 8 goals in 9 games or 8 goals in 10 games or whatever. And everybody was crowing about this is Byfield's team and he's finally here and et cetera, et cetera. And I said, listen, I'm glad to see what he's doing, but before he scored those 6 games in a row, he had 11 goals. It's not a lot. And so the hot streak's over, and now you go all right. Same thing with St. Louis. It's okay, they won, I don't know, let's say it's 12 in a row. All right, before that, they were 31, 28, and 7. I don't know. That's not that impressive. And so, which team is it? Is it 31, 27, and 7 with a unbelievable hot streak attached at the end of it? Or is it actually a team that's 43, 28, and 7? And no disrespect to St. Louis, but I don't know. We've seen teams go on runs and, how often is it run? Anyway, we're going to move on to King of the Week now. So Randon, the drill, the format, but we are tweaking it here. I'm going to ask for a consensus among these 3 gentlemen, but first I'm going to let them each have their pick for honorable mention before I get to mine. So we're going to start with you, Rando.
I guess honorable mention will be a player not on the actual roster of the Kings. I just want to give a stick tap to a prospect, Liam Greentree, the Windsor Spitfires. Moved out of the first round. He's averaging 3 points per game in the playoffs right now.
Yeah.
Absolutely dominant. Had 5 points in the clincher game. So for a guy who was maybe a fringe first rounder, he's too slow to skate, this and that. He's just dominating everything that there is to do in the OHL. And 3 points per game is nothing to snuff at when the games really matter. So my honorable mention will be Liam Greentree.
I like it. That is a perfect off the board pick that doesn't require any point shuffling. Joe, we'll go to you next.
My honorable mention with 2 goals on the week is Kevin Fiala.
Okay.
He ended the week tied first in shot attempts, first in individual high danger chances, scoring chances per natural stat trick. And if I may, I want to go back to his goal against Edmonton, because we see so often LA Kings kind of wingers It's very north-south. It's very direct, if you will. And as soon as he got that puck in his own zone, he makes a play. He darts right to the middle of the ice through the neutral zone, attacks the offensive zone right through the middle, immediately putting pressure on Edmonton. He dishes it over to Laferriere, goes to the net. I think it was Laferriere, goes to the net and ends up finishing. But I just really, really appreciate, and I'll talk about this a little bit later too, but attacking the middle of the ice is not something we see. Some east-west action is not something that we always see with this Kings team. And I just loved that goal that he scored because of how it started back just at his own blue line.
Just to double down on that, we don't see a lot of east-west action, but we also don't see Kevin Fiala going north-south straight to the net. That was the most power forward-esque goal we've ever seen from Kevin Fiala. It definitely wasn't the easiest goal he's ever scored because he had that tap in from Kuzmenko on the power play recently where he didn't really do anything. But I mean, he went straight to the net. I mean, I remember looking back at the heat map of that game, and you can see the little G right in the paint where the goal came from. And I was like, wait, who's? And I was like, oh yeah, that was Kevin Fiala's goal, right? He was right there standing in the crease.
Yep.
All right, Russ, your honorable mention then.
Yeah, my honorable mention is not going to be a player on the team either.
Perfect.
It's going to be Coach Jim Hiller.
Okay.
I think a lot of the talk throughout the year of some of these players, like Joe just mentioned with Kevin Fiala and even other players, Warren Foegele, and now the newcomer, Andrei Kuzmenko, we've heard from all of them that they've found a newfound trust and confidence in themselves. And a lot of that has been pointed toward being coached by Jim Hiller. Most recently, we just when we talked to Jim Hiller after the game in Edmonton, he talked about how he needed to, or how Kevin Fiala wanted to really change the narrative around himself, and it was really on him to do it. And he pretty much put it on his shoulders in order to get that done. And we've seen it. I mean, look at Kevin Fiala; he's turned into this more complete player. There's been a lot of talk that this is probably his best season in a Kings uniform, which I'm not going to disagree with that. And I think Jim Hiller's a big part of that. And same goes for Warren Foegele. We had that conversation with him in December where he talked about he finally has a coach that's really putting trust in him to play his game, and Kuzmenko as well, who's talked about playing with, I think, like 4 or 5 different coaches in his short time span in the NHL, and now he's playing with Jim Hiller, who's turned Kuzmenko into a complete player almost in the short time. It's been really fun to watch. So, yeah, hats off to the coach.
You know, and to your point, Russ, about Hiller and the coaching staff having faith in Fiala, or in Foegele. It's a reminder, and I would just want to hammer this point home for everybody again. Just because you're not on the first line doesn't mean that your role isn't important, and doesn't mean that you can't excel at it, right? Like Warren Foegele is not being given 20 minutes or 18 or 19 minutes a night, but he's being placed in a position to succeed. And then he is succeeding, and I see Joe emphatically agreeing with me. But I mean, like, you know, as a hockey fan who's watched countless teams, every team that's going to be competitive has good players, right? Like you watch Detroit versus Colorado from the 90s, and you go, okay, Sakic and Yzerman and Shanahan and Forsberg and, you know, Lidstrom and Foote, and you go like, okay, yes, and Waugh and Osgood, and you go, all right, each team has their superstar pillars. But frequently what makes the difference between losing in a 7-game series or a 6-game series is your depth and your role players. And so am I going to tell you that Willie Mitchell was more important than Drew Doughty in the Kings, cup runs? No. But every team had a counterpart to Drew Doughty. Not every team had a counterpart to Willie Mitchell. And
just the reason I was so emphatic, Jesse, like as I say on our show, I fully acknowledge the level is drastically lower than the NHL of what I coach in local high school hockey. But just to tell you, like, that's the whole goal of a coach, is to put your players in a position for them to succeed. And whether you're running 3 lines, 4 lines, whatever it is, there's a reason why every single one of those guys is in that particular position. And yeah, it is important. You may not be on the first line, first power play. That does not mean that the position that you're in is not important. So I appreciate you saying that.
Well, I'm going to say something that you may not agree with, but I think I believe in it to this day. The gap between, like, let's just say you think Connor McDavid is the best number 1 center in the league. And you know, I'm not going to push back too hard on that. The gap between the number 1 center in the league and the 32nd best number 1 center in the league, right? Like whoever you think is out there just to fill the role of number one center. It's the same gap between the best third line center in the league and the 32nd worst third line center in the league, right? There are guys who excel at and are excellent at role playing. And yeah, those guys don't get drafted in the first round and they don't make $13 million a year. But if you have guys who are crummy third line players or crummy fourth line, so, we were talking today at practice. So I just ruined the surprise that I was going to spring on everybody that I went to practice today. We were talking about the last 3 playoff series against Edmonton and why the Kings lost each one. And we were going through it and we were like, okay, the first year was a 7-game series. Nobody expected them to go make it competitive because they didn't have Arvidsson. They didn't have Doughty. It was the first year they made the playoffs. Who was this wacky team? We don't know. Then the second year, and I had totally forgotten, was the year that Klim Kostin went on a bender and it was the bottom 6 that beat the Kings in the playoffs. And then last year was obviously the special team disparity. But yeah, those types of players matter. And so excellent pick there, Russ, by you for Jim Hiller, because also it means that Kevin Fiala is your guys' consensus pick. Before I get to my honorable mention, I want to throw out 2 names. Rando, you inspired me to do one of them. Carter George assigned to Ontario. And I don't know which side of the battle you guys all fall on, but as I've said many times, the part of me that enjoys chaos can't wait to see Kings fans fight over Carter George and Hampton Slukinski. Because it's going to get nasty in the Reddit comments and online and on HF boards and Discord and Twitter and Facebook. Like Bernier and Quick, I don't know if any of you guys are old enough or were invested enough back then, but people had opinions. And I mean, like Hoven and I got into it a couple times. Slukinski and George is going to be a good one because they both look great. And so George joins Ontario. And then Jeff Malott is the other one I want to mention because when he scored that goal,
the goal that never was. I was like, awesome. That's 1/3 of my job that I don't have to think about because the rule is if you score your first goal or you play your first game in a Kings jersey, you get an honorable mention. So I was like, great. I don't even have to think about it. He's the one. And then 30 seconds later, no goal. And I threw a hissy fit mainly because I think that rule is stupid and I hate it. But anyway, he's been playing really great. But my pick for honorable mention this week is Drew Doughty. Because he has 1 goal, 2 assists, and a +5. And I was just sort of thumbing through the stats for the full season this year and the fancy stats as they were. And Drew Doughty has not played, a ton of games yet. So, take it all with a grain of salt. But his Corsies, his expecteds, his everything for the full season. Am I going to sit here and tell you that he looks the best he's ever looked? No, I am not. Am I going to tell you that if you want to complain to me that his mobility looks affected by the injury or, the speed or whatever, like, okay, you say whatever you want. I'm not going to argue with you. The effect, the impact, which is what I ultimately care about the most, does not appear to be affected. And like I said, +5. Now, granted, there were only so many goals scored against the Kings this week, so there are only so many opportunities to be on the ice for goals against, but still +5 in a 3-game stretch where they, what did I say? I think they scored 7 goals.
Good.
He was on the ice for 5 of them, and he scored 1 of them, and I know it was an empty netter, but I don't know. He's my honorable mention because it's friggin' Drew Doughty. He's come back and Rando. I think it's important to have a guy like that on your team contributing, even when he's, diminished, shall we say.
I mean, when aren't hockey players diminished?
Well, that's
or injured,
especially this time of
late in the season. Yeah,
totally fair point. Yeah.
I mean, and even a diminished Drew Doughty, the expertise. I mean, you look at the 2 right shot defensemen that play, but behind him on the score sheet, they're still young and that expert veteran leadership as well as just what he brings to the locker room. I think there's a juvenile joy that he plays with, and I think that is felt throughout the lineup.
Yeah. Let's go with childlike. Juvenile sounds
there we go.
Yeah. All right. So we're going to get to the runner-up now. This is where the math is going to get potentially hinky because I doubt you guys are going off roster picks now that we've gotten here. So Rando, we'll start off with you, your runner-up.
My runner-up is going to be Adrian Kempe, and he passed the 30-goal mark again on, I think, Sunday, and he's got 33 right now. But he just passed another all-time Kings list. He's 19th all-time in assists with 200 assists all-time in the Kings.
Wow.
And the next King ahead of him is Lubo Wisnowski with 209. So I don't know if he'll get that this season, but next season he can move quite a bit up the ranks in total assists. Longtime King, so doing it again on the score sheet, not only in a season by season, but all-time career King in assists. So Adrian Kempe passing some record books on both fronts, and he's my second King of the week.
All right, I just want to interrupt real quick before we get to Joe. For those Kings fans who are either too young to remember or too disinterested in remembering, that stat that Adrian Kempe, what did you say, is 19th now? Or
all time, yeah, 200 assists.
What a depressing stat. And that he's passing Lubomir Wisnowski, who, to be clear, I loved, and is, as far as I know, the only King to lead the team in scoring as a defenseman. But, like, Jesus, the fact that Lubo Wisnowski was the previous 19th leader in franchise history, and it's only 200. When you said, like, 19, I was like, oh, man. But, like,
he hasn't passed him yet. He's the next.
He's the next one. But, like, still, like, yeah, that's brutal. Like, this franchise had a lot of dark days before things turned around. So, all right, Joe, your runner-up then.
But Lubo was not among those. I mean, I was telling a player on our team this year, I was like, go look up Lubomir Wisnowski because you remind me of him. Anytime I can throw Lubo out there, I love it. My runner-up this week is Darcy Kemper. 3 games, 3 wins, gets a shutout. I think probably a lot of folks listening has probably assumed that he would be the King of the week, and maybe he will be by the end of it. But for me, and this is not meaning to take anything away from Darcy Kemper, he's clearly doing his job and doing it quite well. But in a week where the Kings don't give up a lot of goals, that's kind of, dare I say, ho-hum. I mean, no disrespect to Kemper. This is just what they do, is they don't give up a lot of goals. And I do want to point out that first period in Utah, though, where he really was key there. But, you know, as the Kings do, is a relatively low event. And in the rest of the week, they were, I thought, pretty dominant against Winnipeg. They had a much better second 2 periods against Utah. And then obviously a fairly diminished Edmonton team. So I don't mean to downplay what Kemper did, but for me, he's going to be runner-up.
I have had to walk back my comments in the offseason about Kemper, and I didn't think that it would be possible for me to think that I was wrong about the point I was making at the time. Like, if I have an opinion, I say, oh, this player's a bum, and then they go out and score a bajillion goals. Well, I was wrong. Fair enough. But when they acquired Darcy Kemper, I said, okay, I first of all, I love the trade because of what it was. Enough about that said. But I was like, okay, Darcy Kemper was great when he was here, but he's a little bit older. And listen, he makes $5 million against the cap, or 5 point something. And so Cam Talbot, if you want to say that you believe Darcy Kemper's better than Cam Talbot, that's between you and the hockey gods. But what he isn't is 5 times better than Cam Talbot, which is what we're talking about now because of cap hits, and cap hits are complicated and they have long-reaching impacts. I am not going to tell you that I think that Darcy Kemper's season has been 5 times statistically better than what the Kings got from Cam Talbot last year. But I will say, Joe, the impact, at least the impression I get, not only as a fan, but as an observer of other fans, is that it might as well be 5 times more. I mean, it just feels better, and he feels lighter and happier, and the locker room. This we can have this conversation after we finish the King of the Week thing. But the locker room, and Russ, you can back me up on this, I never got the impression that the locker room felt awkward or bad last year.
No, yeah.
You saw people joking around and smiling and talking to each other. Like, it didn't feel awkward or weird. There have been specific players or specific moments in the past where I was like, I don't know about all of that. Last year felt fine. This year doesn't feel sufficiently different as far as how the guys interact with each other. But it does when they get on the ice. and when you see them celebrating with each other. And that, I have to believe that at least part of that is due to the presence and the mood and the big goofy smile of Darcy Kemper. And just the fact that when he's out there, he makes those stops. That's a good pick, Joe. I did not have him in my equation, so that's a great pick. Russ, your runner-up.
Yeah, just to kind of quickly follow up on your locker room talk. I mean, Jim Hiller's referenced multiple times the new additions of the players. Jeannot, Kemper, Edmondson, Fogle, all having huge impacts in the locker room. And yeah, like maybe there were players and groups that were closer last year amongst them or amongst those groups than they were, or I guess this year. So, but I think the locker room as a whole, yeah, you see it on the ice, like everybody, and especially those pictures afterwards. It felt like I've had conversations with other fans where you saw those videos after wins last year, and it almost got to a point where it felt like those were kind of forced. And now it just seems really genuine, the kind of affection and care a lot of these players kind of have for each other. So it's been really kind of cool to see, and you're seeing that translate to the ice too. But then I'll go into my runner-up here. I'm going to go with Andrei Kuzmenko. Man, I am thoroughly enjoying the Kuzmenko show. I'm having a lot of fun.
Oh, wow.
And I can't tell you how many fans are blowing up the Twitter feed talking about just giving him a blank check in the offseason already. I mean, 2 goals, 2 assists. I think the goal that he scored against Winnipeg, where he stripped Logan Stanley of the puck in neutral ice or in neutral zone. And then he had that, there was a 2-on-1, but he had like a little twitch right before beating Kellebuck and kind of opened him up a little bit. And to make that type of move on who everybody considers the number 1 goalie in the world, that's a whole lot of confidence that we haven't really seen from a lot of players this year to make that type of move. So, I mean, hats off to the player who's just on a roll and a heater right now, and hopefully that continues to the postseason.
All right, so I'm now going to ask the three of you to discuss amongst yourselves who you'd like to have be your consensus pick for King of the Week. You got Kempe, Kemper, or Kuzmenko.
Well, I'll say I'm just going to say one of the ones that was mentioned is going to be my King of the Week. So if you guys liked him here, then you might like him even more if you let me do my
one of the two guys is going to be my runner-up, and the other one's going to be my King of the Week. So
okay, well, I had Kemper as my King of the Week, so just to kind of fast forward a little bit, and I just wanted to say that because, like, I was with you, Joe. I was going to do the runner-up, but that game against Utah, like that, he stole that game. Like, let's be honest, that first period, the Kings had no business being in that game. And I would like we've had conversations about how the Kings they're so stuck to defense and defense first, and their expected goals. I think they're first in the league as far as allowing expected goals this year. So I wanted to give him a little bit extra credit, and I'll just I'll just start with King of the Week. So I'll go with that. So I went with Kemper, but I see like where Joe is going with that one.
Rando,
I figured a lot of people were going to go, and we're going to have a lot of repeats, and so I wanted to throw in Kempe there just because what he's brought to the Kings and the value he's brought to his contract and how he's blossomed as a player. So it was more of a stick tap pick on top of his records that he's been bringing to the team. I think Russ is right. I mean, that Utah win is not a win without Darcy Kemper, and so he was my original honorable mention. So I think Kemper we'll kind of concede the Kemper spot for number 2.
All right, then we're gonna put him there. All right, which if I'm not mistaken, all right, I'm doing my King of the Week math. So with 2 weeks left, I think that puts Kemper pretty solidly in second place.
Really,
in the King of the Week standings. Yeah, listen, he's had an incredible season, right? Like,
real quick, Jesse, do you think he's the MVP of this season? Bernstein's kind of been pressing Hiller on that.
I'm glad that you mentioned it. Came up today at practice again. There it is. There's the reveal that I went to practice today. No, only because this team in 2021-22, I used the phrase "the power of friendship" a lot, and I meant it sort of tongue in cheek. But the idea that I had with it was like, there's some guy like Dursey and Jeannot and Arvidsson and Edler, and like the team just seemed to like each other so much that they seemed to win games that didn't make any sense to me. And they had 2 lines going, but it was the second line and the fourth line, and it was just this bizarre, weird mishmash of players. And you're just like, I don't know. It's just like they're winning games on vibe and vibe alone, man. Like, I don't get it. This year, I don't get that impression, but I think this year's team is so balanced that I don't think it's really difficult to pick an MVP. The player that I think has been unquestionably the best player on the team is not so far ahead in points than the second best player on the team. And so it seems weird to be like, well, I think this guy is the MVP. And then somebody comes along and goes, well, what about that guy? And you're like, oh,
and really,
point.
And I think Jesse and even rest of that question, like it's been different guys throughout different parts of the season. Like at the start of the season, like Gavrikov was just massive, especially with Doughty's absence, and he's playing the right side. Then you look, Kopitar got on a stretch where he was doing his thing. Then Quentin Byfield went absolutely nuts when some other guys were kind of down a little bit. And then there hasn't been like that one kind of like, steady, consistent guy. I guess, Russ, maybe to your point, you could, I guess, say it's been Kemper in that consistency sense from start to finish. But it's been it's very well balanced. That's for sure.
And, listen, I hate to be that guy, but as I pointed out to somebody on Twitter when I made a nasty comment about Alex Ovechkin, and he said, "This is just hater." And I said, "Yes, that's correct. That's hi. Hello." Listen, their road record is terrible. And so the MVP of the season might be Crypto.com Arena because they're, what are they, 34-4 at home or something like that? Like
the fans of the MVP.
Well, I mean, so not to be snarky because the fans are great, but like there have been some games where they didn't show up. No offense to the fans, because start times have been weird and wacky, and it rained and there were fires and like stuff happens. But like, no, it's just one of those weird. And listen, I don't blame the fans for booing when they did, but there was a game they lost to Buffalo 1-0 early in the season, and the fans booed. And then you look back at the record, and it's like, well, okay, come on, like 29-4-4, 34-4, whatever it is. So, and I don't want to malign the fans. The fans have been great, but like it's just one of those things where it's been a great year, and there's no rhyme or reason to it. I went on Edmonton radio recently, and they asked me, why the despair, why different home record and road record? And I was like, I have spoken to so many people about this. I have not heard a single theory that makes any sort of real sense to me. And I've heard they're like, well, they get the first, the last change at home and the blah, 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 blah. It's like, yeah, but that doesn't explain that, and so I don't know. You just shrug and you go, who cares? They're way better at home, and that's all there is to it. And it'll just one of those weird years. So you guys are going with Kemper for your runner-up. I'm going with Kuzmenko. And, for longtime listeners, my expression, happiness is based on expectation. I had zero expectations when they acquired Kuzmenko, mainly because there's too many teams and too many players for me to keep track of all of them, and I had forgotten that he existed. I remember when he got traded to Calgary, I remember thinking, what are you doing? You're trading a guy who scored 39 goals. I don't understand that. And then he got to Calgary, and honestly, I forgot all about him. Just completely, because he didn't do much. Calgary didn't do much once he got there, and Calgary is in this weird state of rebirth where they won the President's Trophy one year, and then anybody who was any good left. And so I just forgot. And then my brain, as I've said time and time again, for some reason wants to add a syllable to his name and call him Kuzmenenko, but that is not his name. So when they acquired him, I was just like, all right, well, it cost a third-round pick, and as important as I think third-round picks can be, the reality is you can reacquire a third-round pick at the drop of a hat. As it turns out, you can move down in the first round and pick up a second-rounder and still wind up with Liam Greentree, Rando. And get Carter George, all for the price of nothing, of 5 spots in the draft. So third round pick, whatever. And then he came in and 0 points in his first 7 games, 9 points in his next 7 games. And I haven't done the math since then, but I believe we're at 9 points in 11 games or 11 points in 9 games. I might have had that backwards. And through no fault of his own, right? He arrived the day after the trade deadline. He had a game that night. Then they had a back-to-back game on the road the following night. Then they had 3 games in 4 nights. He didn't get much practice time. It always takes a while for a guy to adjust. And once he adjusted, I mean, he brings an element that I don't know that anyone else on the team has. We'll see how long it lasts. But that ability, Russ, like you said, to make that move and get that shot off, incredible. And then on top of that, the plays he made in the neutral zone against Winnipeg were not what I expected from an allegedly undersized offensive only point merchant. I did not expect strong neutral zone play, and he had that funny comment about not wanting to get dirty looks from Kopitar if he doesn't back check.
I like
That was great.
Yeah. And I think one of the, just weaving the MVP conversation into this pick for Kuzmenko, one of the nice things about the way the team is currently structured is that it does have balance. And so Fiala was brought in, and the argument for the Fiala trade at the time, because the price was steep and it, in retrospect continues to be steep, the argument was, well, the team needs offense. And you would talk to some media members and they would say, if they didn't get Fiala, who was going to score points? Who was going to score goals? You need a guy like that. And I'd always go like, well, I don't know. The price was pretty steep. And then last year you're looking at the roster and you're going, okay, well, this guy's on the third line with Lewis and Lizotte. So what are we talking about when, this guy's an offensive powerhouse? But having a guy like Kuzmenko who can and will play with Kopitar and Kempe and will also show off offensive skills on a par with what you expected out of Fiala means that now you have, sorry to Ted Lasso it up again, but now you have two aces and they're on two different lines. You're not loading up one line. You have two guys on two separate lines who seem to be playing with chemistry and cohesion in two different spots. And then you have a totally third line that does totally different things, but can put up points with Fogle, Moore, and Deneau. And now you actually have matchup problems for the opponent. Now it actually does become like, well, who do we focus on? Because now you've got stuff to worry about. And the points, the goals are just, the goal against Edmonton, just out of nowhere. They called it a rocket on the telecast. And it's just like, it's more like a flashbang because it just comes out of nowhere. And after it's done, everybody's just standing there going like, what was that? Where on earth did that come from? He was just carrying the puck in the zone and all out of nowhere. It's in the back. He's a right-handed shot. He's shooting from the right side of the ice, top of the right-hand circle, and he scores left top shelf.
Yeah.
What are you supposed to do about that? I mean, it's unbelievable. So he's my runner-up, and I Russ, I think you picked him for your runner-up. I agree with you. And the impact is I will say this though, to those who are saying back up the Brinks truck and give him 8 years. Let's slow down. It's an incredible run. It's still been less than a dozen games. If you give him 8 years at $13 million and then next December you're like, oh, there's been a slight regression. You're kind of stuck for 8 years. So let's just pump the brakes and remember that he is almost 30 years old. He's been great and I love having him and no complaints. And it didn't cost, basically stole him for free. But let's not be handing out. Let's not Marian Gaborik just yet.
What I loved about that trade was, partly Kuzmenko.
Mm-hmm.
Because it was just going to be kind of those high risk, high reward, or high risk, high reward thing, or actually low risk, high reward. If he didn't score, I guess it didn't really matter. They weren't scoring anyways. But if he provided what they brought, that was going to be huge. But for me, what I love most about that trade was what it just slotted everybody down a spot. Like it moves. Look at what it did. I know, and unfortunately now he's hurt, but it moved Turcotte down to that fourth line. And boy, that was pretty dynamic there for a little bit. The Turcotte, Hellenius, and Jeannot line. And again, I know a couple guys are hurt right now, but that was the impact that I liked. Is it really moved some guys down a little bit, and it really brought that much more depth to the lineup.
And I'll keep pouring on Andrei Kuzmenko because he could have been the king of the week, frankly, for me, and I'm sure one of you guys will pick him. But 2 goals, 2 assists, +3, 16 minutes, 52 seconds of ice time. And, to the point about, what if they had lost the Sharks game instead of won it 8-1? What if they had lost the Oilers game instead of winning it? Rando, I'm not sure if you're old enough to have remembered the early aughts and the number of trades that Dave Taylor made near the end of his tenure, but like as a Kings fan, I don't think that I had it in me to watch another guy get brought in and not do anything. Whether it was Mark Parrish or Anson Carter or Cliff Ronning, or like the list is just as long as anybody wants to go down. If they had brought Kuzmenko in and he hadn't done anything, and you just go like, oh, all right, to Joe's point, like they're not scoring anyway, and maybe he winds up being a fourth liner, and you're like, oh, okay, well, whatever. It didn't cost anything, but fine. But you just go like, again, but no, he's come in and he's looked incredible. And I just think on the hope-o-meter, which doesn't exist, I just think he's replenished it in a lot of ways by not being that kind of player.
I mean, there has been plenty of trades in my Kings fandom, which has been quite a bit later than everybody else on this panel, that have not worked out at the deadline for first round picks and stuff. And we talked about it in the Hockey Royalty pod. Like, what if this is the nice piece that works out? We need a right-handed shot. We need the power play not to be abysmal. We need somebody to work with the Kopitar Kempe. Like, what if what's the high end case for this trade? And my point was it unlocks everything for a third round pick. Like if it slots everybody down, if it finds a partner for Kopitar and Kempe, if it allows Byfield to continue to play with Fiala, if it's the jigsaw piece that allows this team to fit the way it has been fitting for the last couple of weeks, what if? And for a third round pick, it seemed quite worth it. And if it was not, then it's just a third round pick. And like you said, you can find those on the street sometimes. So to me, like I said, Kuzmenko has just kind of been the perfect puzzle piece for this team. And with the cost, with what he brings, the power plays, looks effective. And to me, the Kings have been about structure and defense and all this kind of stuff. And to me, it's finally nice to have a guy that just is happy to score. He just wants to score pucks. He wants to score goals. He smiles. He fist bumps. He goes to one knee. Some excitement on the hockey ice is just nice as a Kings fan. And I'm glad that he's having so much success.
And to that point, I want to address, this was actually the real reason I went to practice today. This seems like as good a spot as any to insert it into the conversation. I had noticed on Reddit that somebody, a fan, and apologies to the Redditor who posted it, I don't remember the account name. Somebody had noticed that the Kings were doing this handshake celebration after an empty net goal. And, you know, they meet and they like cordially shake. And they've done it before years ago. I don't remember when or who it was, but I was like, oh, that's interesting. And then I noticed it. Now I'm watching on TV, not in the arena, Russ. So you know how difficult it is, right? When you're just, all you can do is watch what the camera points at. But I felt like I kept glimpsing, and the Kings fortunately scored a bunch of empty net goals recently. And I felt like I kept seeing glimpses of these formal handshake celebrations. And so when I went to practice today, really the only reason I went in today was I wanted to ask. And I wanted to make sure I asked before anybody else did. Although apparently somebody beat me to it. But yeah, that is the celebration for empty net goals. And it is to symbolize job well done. Like now we finished it. Okay, we got it. And apparently Gavrikov started it. So not that has anything to do with Kuzmenko, Rando, but I just thought, to your point about the celebrations.
The Russian impact, I guess.
Yeah, exactly.
Kopitar and Gaborik, I think, did that years ago. I remember being in Buffalo and they did it in a game.
And they all huddled up and it was like
behind the net. Yes.
Yeah. So anyway, that and the shirt I wanted to show off and accomplished both of those things. All right, so we are going to move on to our King of the Week because as we said, peek behind the curtain, everybody. We had to stop recording for a minute. My laptop wasn't cooperating, but we're back, and so we're going to do the King of the Week. We got you guys all to agree that Kemper was your collective runner-up. My runner-up was Kuzmenko, and so Rando, your King of the Week.
Not to piggyback on the run that I just went on, but Kuzmenko's my King of the Week.
Perfect.
And I think a lot of people thought that he would just be a guy that comes and contributes on the power play, but all of his points were 5-on-5 last week. So he's contributing on the ice at all levels. We talked about his buy-in defensively. And I just think he's been a complete player the last couple of weeks, and it's nice to the fact that he's got, on a run. And I think that he's really added that extra level to not only the first line, but like I said, the jigsaw piece for the rest of the team. So he's my king of the week.
I think that's an excellent one. And what I was looking at on my laptop when it crashed and we had to stop recording was I don't know that it's necessarily a direct impact on Kempe and Kopitar. Like, I'm not going to say that they necessarily have these points because Kuzmenko is in the lineup, but, and I'm talking slowly to give myself time to pull up these numbers. But since Kuzmenko has been acquired, which was March 7th, that was the trade deadline. In the 16 games since he's been acquired, Adrian Kempe has 7 goals, 7 assists, 14 points, and is a +9. Anze Kopitar has 5 goals, 9 assists, 14 points, and is a +11. Quentin Byfield has 12 points, 7 goals, 5 assists, and is a +8. Kevin Fiala has 6 goals, 6 assists, 12 points, +6. Drew Doughty, 3 goals, 9 assists, 12 points, +10. And Andrei Kuzmenko has 5 goals, 6 assists, 11 points in 16 games, and is a +8. I don't know for a fact that that's all because he's in the lineup, but it happened, and he is in the lineup. So
I mean, I'll drink some vodka to that.
Yeah, yes. Adult beverages, I think, is the phrase. Anyway, Joe, you're king of the week.
Hey, I'm going to keep it rolling. My king of the week is Andrei Kuzmenko.
Okay, I had to see. This is where I thought we were going.
So, and yeah, it's totally where I thought it was going to be somewhere else coming into this. But the one thing I'll add to everything that you guys have talked about, you mentioned the 2 goals, 2 assists, all that stuff. I want to go back to, because Russ talked about the first goalie here, or the goalie had in Winnipeg where he stole the puck at neutral ice, goes in and scores off the rush. I want to talk about the goal a little bit in Edmonton because it's just very different from what we see the LA Kings do. So what I mean by that is it's always, we always see them create off the rush a lot of times, right? They're turnover, bang, they go on a rush, try to get something fast break. If not, if they're in the zone, if they're on a forecheck, the MO for the Kings is out on the perimeter, move it to the point, everybody funnels to the net, throw it at the net, traffic, hope for the best. There's the Kings kind of offense in a nutshell. Whereas the goal that Kuzmenko scored it did indeed it got up high. It eventually made its way to Kempe as the F3. He was up high in the zone. And rather than everybody funnel to the net and Kempe throw it at the net, Kuzmenko stays out he was on the right half wall on the hash marks on the right hand side, and you can see he's tapping his stick. He wants the puck. It moves to Kempe, which again, that F3 or defenseman just throw the puck at the net from way out, hoping for traffic. Kuzmenko goes back up, swings up to the top of the right circle. This allows now Kempe to make an east-west pass. Again, I talked about that with Fiala a little bit. Going east-west a little bit. We don't see the Kings do that enough. And I think I just like that offensive brain that Kuzmenko brings to the table, that they really don't have that style anyways, other than Kevin Fiala. And so to have another player like that who is thinking, wait a minute, I'm not just going to go to the net aimlessly. I'm going to circle back up. Kempe's going to move it to me. And what does that do? That means the goalie has to shift his feet over. And then in terms of shifting his feet over, then he's got to come out and challenge. And so there's just more that the goaltender has to do, shifting his feet, his body, his eyes, left and right, and then out to challenge. And as you mentioned, the flashbang, I think you put it, Jesse, earlier, it's just a little rocket of a shot. The release is lightning, and it goes in. And there's not a lot of that east-west play that we see. And I think if we want to see this team take that next step and get past that first round against whether it's Edmonton or whoever else, you got to see them be willing to create more scoring chances rather than other than just throwing pucks at the net from the point and hoping for traffic. Those are types of plays that can create scoring chances. And Kuzmenko did a great job of that this week. So he's my king of the week.
He also, when he does go to the front of the net, it's not, to use the word you used, aimless. There was a Kempe goal. Kopitar circled around the net, found Kempe out front. And the thing that stood out to me about that goal was that Kuzmenko's feet were always pointed towards Kopitar, right? He was planted out front of the net, but he was battling for space. He wasn't just sort of aimlessly standing there, as you say. He was he was occupying a defender.
Yeah.
And presumably also in the goaltender's peripheral, right? So he was a threat, and he was perceived as a threat, and that opens up space for Kempe to move in and receive that pass from Kopitar.
Yeah, and it was a few weeks ago that even Jim Hiller said in a press conference, listen, we're just not going to be a team that scores a lot of goals.
Mm-hmm.
Something I'm paraphrasing. And he kind of, admitted as such, and in large part, like, it's no secret that the Kings aren't a team that scores a ton of goals. They don't create a lot of scoring chances. A lot of it is going to be either off the rush or it's all perimeter. We're going to throw pucks at the point. We're going to roll up our sleeves and hope the bounces go our way, which, as we've seen, is not necessarily a sustainable way to create offense. Which is, again, as Randon was alluding to, is like, what's the high end of this Kuzmenko thing? Well, we're seeing it with just that little bit of offensive creativity, that little bit of again, east-west, which I think we could use a little bit more of sometimes.
So, like I said, this is what I thought. This is where where I figured you guys would all go Kuzmenko. So, Russ, are you going to make it a hat trick of? No, you picked him as your.
I thought everybody was going Kemper. I thought I was the weird one.
Yeah. What's funny too is we'll wake up tomorrow and Kemper's going to be the first star of the week.
Yeah.
In the NHL. That's the funny part.
So you're king of the week then, Russ.
Yeah, I went with Darcy Kemper.
Okay,
I think I mentioned it earlier,
all
but
right.
yeah, we talked him on in, and I don't know if he's necessarily the MVP of the year, like the conversation we had earlier, but there are games, and it's weird because you think about it, it's like if the Kings had a different goalie in net, I think they would still be a playoff team, and we've seen in the past. I mean, Cam Talbot pretty much took them to the playoffs last year too, but there are times where Darcy Kemper has pretty much stolen the game for them, and I think it gives at least myself more confidence going into the playoffs, knowing that Darcy Kemper is the one in net compared to maybe Jonathan Quick, who was at the sunset of his career, or Cam Talbot, or whoever that we've seen in the past. So, yeah, I think that is an added confidence now that the Kings have going into whether it is Edmonton or whoever they face.
All right, well, Russ, you're outvoted, so we're making your guys' collective pick Kuzmenko, which gives him 5 King of the Week points on the week, which is pretty good. But my King of the Week, which means the correct King of the Week, sorry, boys, is Adrian Kempe. And it could have gone either way. I mean, honestly, like, if somebody wants to tell me that this week it was Andrei Kuzmenko, I'm not going to fight about it too hard. But for me, Adrian Kempe, he had 2 goals, 2 assists, 4 points, +5, 18 minutes, 24 seconds of ice time, 28.6 shooting percent, 7 shots on goal, et cetera, blah, blah, blah. There is something to be said for consistency. The King of the Week is supposed to be about just the games that we've been playing, but he is just, at this point, they kind of mentioned it on the telecast, he has become the Kings' best player. And, to use the Joker meme, like, I'm kind of tired of pretending he's not. People say, like, oh, Quentin Byfield scored a bunch of goals in a row. He's the Kings' best player. Kevin Fiala's got the most skill, so he's the Kings' best. Yeah, okay, fine, whatever. Adrian Kempe is the Kings' best player. He kills penalties. He plays on the power play. He plays 5-on-5. He's out there in overtime. He's fast. He can pass. He can shoot. He's big. He's physical. He's their best player. And when he is tied for the lead in points in a week, late in a season where you beat Winnipeg, you extend your lead on the second on the third place team in the division, and you've got points in all of them. I don't know. I wish I had more to say about Adrian Kempe because we just spent a lot of time talking about Kuzmenko, but he's my guy. So,
well, you could, we talked about the question before about the MVP and maybe I specifically, because I had said, there really hasn't been that one guy that is just kind of this consistent all season and yada, yada. Maybe for a moment there, I took for granted how good Adrian Kempe just has been this season. He's definitely reached a different level in his career a couple of years ago, and he's maintained this. He's a heck of a player, and I'm not going to sit here and push back on you that he's the best player on the team. Because he's certainly doing it from on a more consistent basis. Like, there's stretches where Byfield looks outstanding, but we have not seen it for a full 82 yet, and we have seen it from Kempe now for a while.
The only reason that I feel uncomfortable saying that Kempe is the team's MVP is that he's got 64 points and Kopitar is 62. And
Sure.
so you just go like, all right, is a guy who plays on the same line with Anze Kopitar, who's basically got the same amount of points. Like, is he really more important than Anze Kopitar? Like, no,
Fair. Yeah.
not really. But he's, I mean, in the King of the Week points, which, reflect nothing. Adrian Kempe is by far in first place. He's got 76 points now with my points going to him for this week. He's got 76. Kemper has 44. Byfield has 41. Kopitar has 37. Fogel has 27. Kuzmenko is 23. He's launched right up the. But I mean, the reason I count these points and the only reason I think it matters is that it does, in some small way, represent who we talk about.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's unfair to defensemen and goalies because if there's a week where there's 3 games and they split them between Riddick and Kemper, it's tougher for them to collect. And obviously a guy like Mikey Anderson, or I went on a rant about Jordan Spence the other night because if you look at the fancy stats, Jordan Spence is just never on the ice for a goal against.
It's really good.
And I get it. He's minutes played, and I brought it up at practice today and a couple people gave me pushback and were like, yeah, he's not Drew Doughty. He's not playing all these minutes. So blah, blah. And I was like, yeah, okay, fine. But go back and find me a team with a good third pair defenseman who has similar numbers. Like, to my point earlier that, Rando was talking about Fogel and the role he plays. It's like, yeah, so Jordan Spence isn't playing a ton of minutes, but having a third pair or second pair defenseman who can be that good will frequently be anyway, this is not talking about Spence. We're talking about Kempe. Russ, sorry, was that?
Well, no, I was
raise
just going
your
to
hand, or?
No, yeah, those are important minutes. And I'm glad that Jim Hiller said that in talking about the fourth line last game. He said, I asked him about it, and he said, just kind of talking about them, he said those were important minutes that line has to play. And same thing with Jordan Spence, same thing with his partner, who we talked about with Jacob Moverara, even earlier in the season, like his even added benefit. Like, those are all important minutes. We can't diminish, even if they're fourth line players or third line players, they play critical roles in the role that they play. And yes, you can win and lose games with those players. So we can't lessen the effect that they have if they play 8 to 10 minutes a game. That's still 8 to 10 minutes of a 60-minute hockey game that they have to play.
Having said that, when certain players play those 8 minutes and everybody freaks out because they're still in the lineup, enough already. I get it. We don't love it, but calm down. Anyway,
I just think to throw it back to Kempe and him being the king of the week. I think he's a chameleon. Like, he can play any style line. If you want him to play a shutdown defensive role, he can play a shutdown defensive. If you want him to run and gun, like a lot of people thought he would with the Four Nations tournament in Sweden, he can do that. He can be a power play merchant on the dot and just launch one-timers. I think he's the most dependable. He's styleless. Like, whatever you want him to do, he can do. And for a guy who, before his contract, everybody thought that he was a bust and couldn't play center and was a waste of a draft pick, has become the linchpin of this hockey team. And
it's funny in every sport, not just hockey. If you're listening to conversations about who the best teams are, they'll say they can beat you however they want, right? They can play your game, they can play their game, they can do offense, they can do defense, they can do physical, and whatever. If it's basketball, they can do big lineups, small lineups, whatever. That's Adrian Kempe, right? He's not a team, he's a guy, but however you want to play it, he'll play it. And this week he played it incredibly well. He's been doing it all season long. So congratulations, Adrian Kempe, this week's King of the Week. Before we wrap up, and thank you guys for joining me. I think we talked about this earlier, so we might be revisiting the same conversation. But Russ, I'll just start with you. Last night, Vegas and Calgary were playing. And if Calgary won, the Kings would be a point out of first behind Vegas. And if Vegas won, the Kings would clinch a playoff spot. Who are you pulling for?
I think you got to hope for the division.
Okay.
I mean, I'm not looking at
that is the right
matchups.
answer. Heads up, Joe and Rando, but that's the right answer.
Yeah, let's be real.
All right.
Jim Hiller answered it in he's been talking as if this team is in the playoffs because they're in the playoffs. Like, just the whole official clinching thing sometimes gets a little, I get it. It is what it is. But yeah, you were rooting for Calgary to win that game. Yeah. They're going to make the playoffs. They didn't, that game notwithstanding.
Rando, I'm assuming you're going to make it unanimous here.
Yeah, clean sweep, bring out the brooms. I was hoping for a Vegas loss there. I think it's commendable to make the playoffs four years in a row and have as many points as they're projected to get. But Yeah, you got to hope that you win the division and have that kind of advantage going into the playoffs.
It's funny, if this conversation had taken place a month ago, I would have claimed not to care about winning the division. And I would have believed that I didn't care about winning the division, because for years people have pointed out, oh, the Kings have never won the Pacific Division. They have one division banner, but it was back when it wasn't called the Pacific. So technically it is factually accurate. The Kings have never won the Pacific, but they did win the division once. But honestly, like, who cares? And it is kind of a who cares to me. Until yesterday, when all of a sudden I was looking at the possibility of being 1 point behind Vegas with 6 games to play. And I was like, 1 point's a lot easier to erase than 3. And it would be really nice to play St. Louis in the first round.
A month ago, I wouldn't have. I would have cared because I don't want to play Edmonton again.
Sure.
But I didn't think it was. I just didn't think how realistic it was that they were going to catch Vegas.
Yeah.
And even still, like, I know it's 3 points and we'll see what happens with Vegas tonight. Like, it requires that team to lose a fair amount of games. And there's a reason that they're in first place in the division. So the chances of them losing a fair amount of games here down the stretch in combination with you winning, it's a tough combo, even though the numbers are getting smaller, but so are the games left to be played. So, I absolutely think that winning the division, would be nice. That's for sure.
At the moment, Vegas is tied with Vancouver 2-2.
Okay.
But we saw how that went with Calgary last night. I'm not holding my breath. But yeah, it's incredible sometimes how, and listen, math was never my strong suit, but you forget sometimes that 2 points, the difference between 2 points and 4 points, or 1 point and 3 points, can be huge, right? Like, there's 6 games left. The idea that Edmonton will outperform the Kings record by 5 points, it's pretty tough.
Yeah.
Because the Kings get to play games too. And one of them is against Edmonton. I mean, that'll be an incredible 4 point swing. Anyway, I have said time and time again, and I will keep repeating it. My medical advisors have asked me to stay away from people. But if the Kings get home ice advantage, and it is Edmonton for the 4th year in a row, and game 1 is at Crypto.com Arena, unless I have had an infusion of chemotherapy that day and am home vomiting or something, I will be at that game. And I would like to see anybody try and stop me, because I have heard the arguments that home ice advantage doesn't matter statistically. But just as a fan, and Russell,
Sure.
about, I mean, Russ, if game 1, 4th year in a row against Edmonton, is in LA, that place is going to be packed. And when that puck gets dropped, the place is going to go nuts.
Yep.
And I just am not going to miss it. I refuse to not be there unless I cannot be there.
I mean, game 1 is game 1 at the start of the Stanley Cup playoffs, and that's where possibilities are endless, right? And fans go into it thinking that you have a chance to win it all, and that's where excitement levels are peaked. So, bring it on.
Now, I do, though, have to, so I can't help it. I am who I am. I brought this up on a Kings Talk episode. There's a lot of like, this hasn't happened since this year, or that hasn't happened since that year, or it's awesome. Like, the last time the Kings had 230 goal scorers was 2007, 2008. I'm like, cool. That was the year we finished in a tie for last place with Tampa and got Drew Doughty in the drafts. Like, that's not a great season. So let's pump the brakes on like celebrating an event that the last time it happened was a bummer of a year. And I was looking back, because, the Kings set the record for most home wins in a season. And I went back to see when the previous sort of record had been set. And I think they had 46 wins. It wasn't their best points in a season, but 46 wins in a season was the most wins they'd ever had. And it was the 2015-16 season. And for those of you who remember, the Kings got curb stomped in the first round of the playoffs by the Sharks that year. And it was a really fun regular season. And that was the year, if I'm not mistaken, that they had Lucic in the lineup. Or no, that was a different season. They had LeCavalier and the defenseman whose name Luke Schenn.
15-16. I thought Lucic was in that lineup. He was on that team.
Was he? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, then there you go. Then they also
remember
got
him and Alec Martinez had that like handshake
Yes.
after every win or whatever.
Yes, that's right. The chest bump. Yeah.
Yeah, the chest bump. That's right.
Yeah. So, but I mean, like that that year was a year where, as a Kings fan, yeah, you're right, Russ. Sorry, I don't know how I corrected myself there, but yeah, but like that was a fun season where you were like, okay, they missed the playoffs in 14-15, but now they're back and it's 15-16 and they've got 46 wins and rah, rah, rah. And then, so like, just a reminder, the playoffs are actually, sorry, Ken Belkey from Sin Bin, the playoffs are a different game. They are a different sport. It is a different season. And the regular season is there to help you with your seeding as much as possible, but it doesn't, as cliche as it is, and I can't believe I'm about to say it, they do throw the record books out once the playoffs start.
Well, just consider, like, if you're right. I mean, if only because, you have, and especially in LA and Edmonton's case, because they have, kind of known, I guess there's an odd chance that it won't happen, but they're probably going to play each other. And they've known this now for a bit. They are spending weeks preparing for this, like their video coaches and everything. They're going through every single bit of tape that they can go through, so it becomes different. So their random game on April 5th that doesn't have McDavid or Draisaitl, and Doughty leaves the game early, is going to be a different game than it is on April 22nd, because there's been hours and days worth of preparation and matchups that are going into this on both ends of it. Presumably you've got both teams at a different health state. And there's just more on the line, and there's going to be different ways that they're going to look to attack. And I think playoffs are just different in general because of that. Like, this is why I don't put, not to go on a rant, but like, with the whole home road thing, I mean, I just think there's no rhyme or reason sometimes. There's at least nothing in the statistics that suggest that there is. So I think you're playing teams on all sorts of like random ins and outs and ups and downs, and same with the Kings. But when you get to playoffs, you are playing the same team. It's the same matchup. And now the coaching staffs have different opportunities to prepare. They make adjustments after each period, after each game. So it is just different. And I don't think like you can take a playoff matchup and you beat this team all 4 times in the regular season. I don't think that matters when it comes to the actual playoff series against that same opponent, because I think all the circumstances are different. Preparation's different. And there's so much that's different now, focusing on one best of 7 series.
This is why this is actually the worst time of the year, because we're now at the point where we're just playing out the stretch. Like it's almost, I mean, I don't want to say worst, but it's like, we'll have, you guys will have this conversation. I'll have this conversation. Everybody will have this conversation. There's six games left, 2 weeks left, and it's just like, okay, let's just get to the playoffs.
Seattle Kraken on Monday.
Yeah, Ducks on Thursday, and you're like, all right. I mean, okay, but the reality is we all want the playoffs to start. Once you get the X next to your name, it's like, or like Jim Hiller said, Joe, they've been talking about the playoffs. Yeah. So anyway, gentlemen, thank you for joining me. If somehow you are listening to this and you've never heard of Hockey Royalty before, seems unlikely, but Rando, tell them where to find you guys if for whatever reason they have not heard of you before and they want to find more of it.
Yeah, all articles are at hockeyroyalty.com. You can follow us on social media platforms at hockey_royalty. We all have our individual platforms. We do live YouTube showings usually once a week where you can join us, throw your comments on there, get involved in the show. So we appreciate our fans that show up there and really join us. So it's been a blast doing Hockey Royalty with these guys.
Well, I appreciate you all joining me. And for everybody on Twitter wanting to know where I got the Phil Deneau Hawaiian shirt, I ordered it on Amazon. You can put whatever you turns out you can put whatever you want on a Hawaiian shirt. You just got to pay him a little bit of extra money. So I did a Google search of photos of Phil Deneau, slapped him on a Hawaiian pattern that I liked, and there you go. Now I've got a Phil Deneau Hawaiian shirt. So if you want to spend the money, not that impressive a feat, really. Just go to Amazon. Anyway, Rando, Joe, Russell, thank you all for joining me, and hopefully I will see you, Russ, sooner than later. And Joe and Rando, I've still never met you face to face.
One day.
Yeah, one day. All right. Thanks for joining us.